This is chapter 13, part 4. Let's continue on talking about drinking among college students. College students who drink alcohol at some time over the past year frequently report alcohol related problems while at college. Of course, frequency has a lot to do with whether there's a problem or not. If you just want, very rarely or occasionally, it's not going to be correlated with much sort of alcohol related problems, but frequent drinking can be. 1 in 4 students, or about 25%, report that their drinking had a negative impact on their academic performance. Problems including missing a class, falling behind on course assignments, doing poorly on exams or papers, and receiving lower grades overall. So we know that this is kind of a common occurrence, as we saw with some of the stats before, that you do get some students who do an awful lot of drinking in college, and a lot of heavy binge drinking, and that this can get in the way of the real reason you're supposed to be in college, to be getting yourself an education. That sometimes those two things don't always support each other. Nearly 20% of all 21 to 25-year-olds report driving under the influence. So it's 1 out of 5. That's a pretty high number. Driving under the influence of illicit drugs or alcohol. So, and often with illicit drugs could be marijuana. So 1 in 5, that's a pretty big number. And roughly 1,800 students age 18 to 24 die from unintended alcohol-related injuries each year, most of which involve motor vehicle accidents. Yeah, so a lot of this is driving under the influence. Now you could say, well, 1,800, it's always hard to know how big that number is. Context helps. Well, let's if we look at all of the fatal car accidents in the United States per year, you might get, very roughly speaking, about 50,000 Americans of all ages, 50,000 who die in car accidents per year in the US. So 50,000 versus 1,800 among these students, college students. So that's, college students is just a fraction of the total population. And so, it's contributing a certain amount to deaths that come from car accidents and other deaths from different types of injuries. Pretty significant number. Nearly 700,000 students are assaulted by another student while under the influence per year, and close to 100,000 alcohol-related sexual assaults are reported. So that's significant. When you're talking about, if you look at crime stats, just to give you an example, a typical year in the United States, you have about 100,000 rapes that are reported to the police. Varies, but typical year around 100,000. See, here you have, just among college students, 100,000 alcohol-related sexual assaults. So that gives some perspective there. These are pretty high numbers when you're getting into the hundreds of thousands. So you can see that there is a certain amount of violence, sexual violence, that's associated with consumption of alcohol at college. And a study found that during their first year of college, 15% of women experience incapacitated sexual assault. 15%, so that's a troubling number as well. Incapacitation means victims are unable to give consent due to their physical state, which may be the result of voluntary or involuntary substances. So we're talking about someone who either is getting drunk or is getting high. It could be that they're voluntarily getting in that intoxicated state, or could, in some cases, it could be that somebody's secretly giving them something that incapacitates them, and then they're being sexually assaulted without, and then there's no consent due to their physical state. So that's 15% of women. That's like a little more than 1 out of 6 in the first year of college. So that sexual assault problem is a common one, and sexual assault related to substances, to alcohol and other drugs. Only 1 in 5 college-age women who are sexually assaulted end up reporting the incident to the police. So yeah, the most of the time, and this is true with various sorts of sexual assault and rape statistics, that the numbers are usually quite low. Here you have 1 in 5, about 20%. Some studies you find with reporting rapes to the police at about 30%, but it's always let well under 50%. And to add to that, if you go down the line and not only look at the police being told about the crime, but also looking at an arrest being made, a charge being made, a conviction being made, and punishment, like say some jail time, that once you go down the chain like that, that you have a very small percentage of sexual assault incidents that result in jail time. Very low percentage. I've seen studies at like 4% of 4% of the incidents that are reported or that are reported to like a survey, not to the police, but just reported to somebody. That of those, only in one study I saw, only 4% resulted in some jail time. So most of the time, it's these crimes are not resulting in any accountability or punishment. Alcohol use often begins in middle school among young people who report some alcohol consumption between the ages of 12 and 20. The average age when drinking begins is 14. Now, one thing, this is taken from the textbook. Let me add one thing, not from the textbook, that I think is really more important, which is that studies clearly show that the earlier you start drinking, the greater the risk of problems down the road. Alcohol dependency, alcoholism, problems associated with too much drinking, just bad stuff that can happen while you're drinking, unsafe sex, criminality, violence. That those things are more likely to be happening the earlier that you start drinking. It's a good thing for kids to take their time before they ever consider start drinking. That they do grow up first, because that young consumption of alcohol is correlated with problems down the road. Among underage people who drank in the past month, about 1/3 report that the alcohol was provided free by an adult. So this now we're getting to, where's this alcohol being provided from? Quite often, underage people are getting it from grown-ups, free, giving it to them. About 20%, 1 in 5, were given alcohol free by a parent, guardian, or other family member. So here we have, you can see there's quite a few kids who are getting access to alcohol from family members who, evidently are not worried about kids drinking underage. About one half drink alcohol in someone else's home, about one half. About 1/3 drink in their own home, and about 7% reported drinking alcohol in a restaurant, bar, or club. So they weren't being carded, their ID was not being checked, or they, I don't know, had false ID or something. And so they're drinking in a public establishment. About 1/3 of convicted offenders on parole or probation report that they had been drinking at the time of their offense. So now we're moving into the correlation between abusing alcohol and crime and violence, and it's a pretty close correlation. You do see a high number of individuals. Could be this in this particular statistic here. We have 1/3, but sometimes you see studies that'll be 40%. That could be 50% of people who are under the influence when they commit a crime, or the victim of the violence is inebriated when they're attacked. So whether you're talking victims, whether you're talking offenders, alcohol and other drugs too, but definitely alcohol is present quite often in those incidents of crime, especially violence we're talking about here. Nearly 25% of state inmates report having experienced problems with alcohol, consistent with a diagnosis of alcohol use disorder. So there's a lot of people involved in crime who have an alcohol problem. The correlation is there, and it's quite strong. Offenders that abuse substances are more likely to reoffend or recidivate, and not only commit this, like say the same crime, or commit, say, something like driving under the influence, which is obviously related to alcohol, but that they're more likely to reoffend in lots of different types of crimes, whether it be theft, burglary, auto theft, violence, assault, aggravated assault, attempted homicide, rape, sexual assault, or other sorts of illegal drug, or in this case illegal drug use. So a wide range of crimes, not just something that's obviously related to alcohol. So a broad range of crimes compared to people who are not abusing substances, or not abusing alcohol in this particular case. Those who misuse alcohol often spend time with others who consume alcohol and drugs. So this is the reason why alcohol's correlated with being involved in crimes, is that you're hanging out with people. When you're drinking and misusing alcohol, you're hanging out with other people who are doing the same, drinking together, and that group effect, we know that the group can influence you and pull you into crime when your friends and or acquaintances are also involved in crimes and may influence you to commit crimes sometimes as well. When offenders spend time with others who have been or are presently involved in criminal behavior, they're more likely to get in trouble again. That's a basic finding we know in delinquency, and it's true for adults at some level too, that your friends influence you, and if they're criminals, that they will tend to pull you towards crime. Alcohol decreases natural inhibitions, which can increase the likelihood of decisions to engage in behavior such as breaking into a car or a home or assaulting someone at a bar. Regular alcohol misuse can interfere with getting and keeping a job, as well as developing healthy ways of coping with stress and spending time with family and friends. So we're showing here, we're outlining multiple pathways by which alcohol could lead to problems and lead to more crime, or staying involved in crime. In most cases, individuals on community supervision, meaning probation or parole, they're required to stay away from alcohol, to abstain from alcohol, and to avoid establishments that sell alcohol, such as bars and clubs, because the people who make these policies know that these individuals are likely to get into trouble if they're consuming alcohol. So they make this rule that you need to stay away from it so you can stay out of trouble. That's the thinking anyway. Community supervision may be revoked for individuals violating this condition, requiring them to turn to prison. So they take, probation officers take this rule seriously, this rule of no alcohol and no hanging out of places where alcohol is served. In a study of federal probationers, substance abuse was a risk factor for violating probation or parole. Reductions in substance abuse scores for high and moderate risk offenders corresponded with a decreased risk of reoffending overall. So there's plenty of evidence that if there are programs that can effectively get individuals to work on their alcohol dependency problems, and to reduce alcohol abuse, that can translate into staying out of trouble with the law, in reductions in criminal involvement. So that's an area we can work on that can help folks to reduce things we're concerned about, like various types of crimes, various types of violence. Is to work on the alcohol problem for those who have that problem. And as we can see from the stats, it's a pretty common problem among people involved in crime. So that covers the sections of the chapter I decided to focus on. Again, to me, the essentials, the basics, we need to cover those if we don't have time to get to the other stuff in lecture form. But I want you to continue on with throughout the chapter, trying to get at least a sense of the things that are stressed a lot, the big points. And there is quite a bit of the chapter that I simply did not have time to cover. So I'm going to leave that up to you folks. And as always, reach out, email, contact me if you're kind of worried about what's most important or what needs to be studied, that kind of thing. Just let me know.